Dear friends in Christ, it's 9:30 on this beautiful day, day when the church commemorates Ignatius. So we are in a spirit of discernment and a spirit of love, aware of our consolations and aware of many others' desolations. We begin this morning with worship. Let us worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. I call on Dean Shambo to lead us in an opening prayer.
This is a prayer from the presiding bishop for the power of the Spirit among the people of God. Let us pray. God of all power and love, we give you thanks for your unfailing presence and hope you provide in times of uncertainty and loss. Send your Holy Spirit to enkindle in us your holy fire. Revive us to live as Christ's body in the world, a people who pray, worship, learn, break bread, share life, heal neighbors, bear good news, seek justice, rest, and grow in the Spirit. Wherever and however we gather, unite us in common prayer and send us in common mission, that we and the whole creation might be restored and renewed through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dean Shambo. And we give thanks this morning and we join our presiding bishop for in spirit, and we give thanks for him. In accordance with Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution of the Diocese of Maine, and with thanks to God for all that has been, assurance for all that is right now, and great hope for all that shall be, I declare the 201st Convention called to order. And here's the gavel. I call now on several of us to make announcements.
Good morning, everyone. This is Katie. Just a few brief announcements for you. During convention, unless you are called upon to speak, please do ensure that your microphone is muted. Do have your Zoom chat screen open. We've got private chat disabled for this meeting as we did for the last town hall. If you have the bandwidth to do so, do feel free to post to social media today about convention. If you do so, please use the hashtag Episcopal Maine. Thank you. And I will call on Teresa.
Teresa will be posting the link to the amendment form in the chat. So if you would like to make an amendment as we go through the meeting, please look in the chat for the link. Thank you, Teresa. Bishop?
Thank you very much. If you would like to speak to an amendment on the floor of convention, please utilize the raised hand function in Zoom. If you have a technology question or are answering a call to second something that's been put forward, please also use the chat function. You can simply type the word second in the chat. If you would like to present an amendment, there is a link to the amendment form, as Canon Martin just said. And if there is an amendment submitted to any of the resolutions, I will be notified and the text of the amendments will then be read while a slide showing that change is being prepared. So I ask your patience as we tend to making sure that you get all the information you need before you vote. We will proceed according to Robert's Rules of Order and the rules of order for this convention. Presented before you is the consent calendar that was introduced at Town Hall and posted on the website. Unless somebody requests to remove one of these items, you will be asked to adopt it as presented in just a few moments. We move now to the committees and appointments for the 201st Annual Convention. Without objections, these appointments are now made with the thanks of the convention to those who are serving. I'll give you a moment to read those names. Wonderful, faithful people, thank you very much for serving. We're going to I'm going to congratulate you first and say thank you for all of the ways in which you have participated before today. I think most of us are conversant now with polls and how we're going to use polls. When we vote, I will declare that the polls are open. And then you'll wait a moment. We'll all wait. The polls should appear on your screen. And then you should vote. After a few moments, I will say polls are closing. That will give you a little heads up that in just a few seconds, the poll will close. And then I will announce polls are closed. So you're going to hear me say three things whenever we vote. Polls are open, polls are closing, and polls are closed. Once the poll has closed, no more votes can be registered, and the results will then be displayed for all of us to see. The secretary will record each ballot and capture a screenshot of those results. These will constitute the formal record of all of our ballots. The recording of this entire proceeding will be archived and serve as a backup should there be a need. All of our votes are anonymous. I call now upon the Chancellor.
Bishop Thomas, I move that the special rules of order for this convention, as posted on the diocesan website, be the rules of order for this convention.
Thank you very much. Polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
Bishop, for the official record, poll, do you accept the rules of order for this convention as presented? 225 people voted in the affirmative for a 100% result. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have adopted the rules of order. We return now to considering the consent calendar. Having not heard anybody request that something be removed, I ask you now, in just a moment, we will vote on it. Polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
Bishop, for the official record, the answer to the question, do you accept the consent calendar for this convention as presented? 224 delegates voted in the affirmative for a 100% result. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. We have adopted the consent calendar. I will call now upon the Committee on Credentials, including Ms. Holly Sargent, to make their report of certification.
Bishop Thomas, on behalf of the Committee on Credentials, I report that we have certified 94 members of clergy, 148 delegates, 1 chancellor and 1 treasurer. I call on Canon Martin to make certain that these are the correct numbers that I should be reporting as to those that are certified.
Thank you, Ms. Sargent. You are absolutely correct. Of the 187 canonically resident clergy in good standing, plus 8 licensed priests in charge entitled to seat, voice, and vote at this convention, 94 are present. I also certify that of the 154 lay delegates entitled to seats and votes in the diocese, 148 are present at this convention. 58 out of the 59 parishes and missions in the Diocese of Maine are also represented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you to both of you. Accordingly, we can affirm and declare and celebrate that we have a quorum. I call now upon the Reverend Sarah Gavitt to report on the certificates of communicants and certificates of election of lay delegates as submitted to the Committee on Credentials.
Good morning, and thank you, Bishop Thomas. Your Committee on Credentials reports that all certificates of communicants and certificates of the election of lay delegates as submitted to the committee are in proper legal and canonical order. The lay delegates of 58 parishes and missions are entitled to seat, vote, and voice, as each of these congregations have paid its 2019 assessment in full.
Without objection, I grant seat and voice to the officers of the diocese, members of diocesan bodies, and diocesan staff. Information regarding the various elections to come before convention can be found on the convention webpage. We move now to voting. We will vote there for 2 elections on the same slide. So just bear in mind that when the ballot appears for you, you will be voting for 2 elections, both in the clergy order and in the lay order for standing committee. The polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
The polls are closing, and while the polls are closing, let me say a word of thanks to all 5 of these persons who have offered themselves. We give thanks to all 5 of you. The polls are closing. The polls are closed.
Bishop, the registrar begs a moment to confer with the chancellor about the results of this election.
Absolutely. The convention is at ease. You may go get a cup of coffee, but don't be long. Let's take a 2-minute break.
Chancellor, I will call you on your phone, please. Thank you.
After conferring with Registrar Barb Martin, it appears that we have a clear winner in the clerical order, and I'll let her announce that in due course. In the lay order, we do not have anyone with a clear majority. There are 3 candidates in that election. Under our special rules, which in this case are the rules we usually follow anyway, where there's not a majority on the first ballot, we go to a second ballot, and we'll be looking for a, excuse me, we'll be looking for a majority on that second ballot. And if there's not a majority on the second ballot, on the third ballot, the person having the plurality will win.
Thank you, Chancellor. Bishop, I would request to announce the winner of the election in the clerical order and relaunch the poll for the delegates to vote once again in the lay order. May I have your permission, please?
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
For standing committee in the clerical order, the Reverend Sarah Gavitt has 151 votes, 68% of those voting, and the Reverend Peter Jenks, 71 votes, or 32%. I will now clear the poll and ask delegates to vote only for a standing committee representative in the lay order. Thank you.
Polls are open and they should be displayed in front of you. At this point, you are not going to elect, you're not going to vote in the clerical order because Sarah Gavitt has been elected. So you're only going to vote in the lay order, and you'll see all 3 persons' names there.
It won't let you submit, I'm afraid, without voting for both.
If you are having trouble submitting without voting for both, then please cast your ballot for Reverend Sarah Gavitt, the winner on ballot 1.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Everybody understands that I was wrong, and we do have to vote again in the clerical order. And if you vote for Sarah, we'll be consistent with what we did previously, and then vote for one of the laypersons and then press submit.
Barbara, I closed it thinking that I would go into the lay, and so I've lost the whole thing to vote.
All right, thank you. Please stand by. Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed. We realize that several of you didn't get a chance to vote, and we're going to address that in just a moment.
Thank you, Bishop. Once again, there is no clear winner in the lay order for standing committee, and I request that we relaunch the poll according to the rules outlined by the Chancellor previously.
Thank you. Let's proceed.
Barb?
Yes, Chancellor.
Yes, this is Gordon. Our practice in the past in a situation like this, I think, should be followed, and that is we inform the body, that would be the convention, of the votes that the 3 candidates had. That's been a useful practice and helps people to prioritize, and I would recommend that we do that at this point.
Thank you, Chancellor. The votes are as follows in the order the nominees appear on your ballot. For Ms. Lisa Lindsay, 83 votes. For Mr. Sam Allen, 59 votes. For Ms. Kimberly Wallace, 75 votes.
The chair requests that Ms. Teresa Pinney would put that in the chat so that we can see that.
Lisa Lindsay, 83. Sam Allen, 59. Kim Wallace, 75.
Friends, let's just take a moment so that you can both hear that and see that.
Teresa, do you need it again?
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Lisa Lindsay, 83. Mr. Sam Allen, 59. Ms. Kimberly Wallace, 75.
And may I remind the body, this upcoming vote being our third vote, the person having the plurality will be the winner.
And as we have learned this morning, please cast one vote for Sarah Gavitt so that you are allowed to vote in the second question. Are you ready? Bishop?
Polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed. May we have the results, please?
Bishop, for the record, for standing committee in the lay order, Ms. Lisa Lindsay received 116 votes, Mr. Sam Allen, 27, Ms. Kimberly Wallace, 77, and the registrar declares the election has been won by Ms. Lisa Lindsay. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you. And once again, thank you to all 5 of you for offering yourself and for continuing to be a leader and a servant of the gospel in this place. We shift gears now to make a sort of important commercial about the United Thank Offering. You can't really, in front of you is a screen. The United Thank Offering is a really important part of our church. It's a mission of the entire church. Through the United Thank Offering, individuals are invited to embrace and deepen a personal daily spiritual discipline of gratitude. The United Thank Offering encourages people to notice the good things that happen each day, giving God thanks for those blessings, and then making an offering for each blessing in the UTO mite box. UTO is entrusted to receive these offerings and to distribute 100% of what is collected to support mission and ministry throughout the Episcopal Church and throughout other provinces of the Anglican Communion. The current president of the entire organization is a Mainer, Sherry Dietrich of Waldoboro, and the offertory from tomorrow's diocesan-wide worship service will go in support of the United Thank Offering. I invite you to donate generously, and you can do that by clicking on the donate button. You can see that right in front of you. This is a screenshot of our website at episcopalmaine.org. And if you click on donate, you'll see a drop-down menu of all of our churches and institutions, including the United Thank Offering. And let me just say a word about how important it is for us in Province 1, meaning the Dioceses of New England, to make the UTO once again a weekly, daily, and yearly practice of our lives. I was aware that at General Convention 6 years ago, when we have an ingathering of all of the offerings over the previous 3 years, that our friends in Province 9, meaning the Spanish-speaking dioceses of our church, which are much poorer than we in New England are, the people of Province 9 gave over $100,000 more than we did in New England. So I encourage each of you in your faith context to make the United Thank Offering an important part of your life. We move now to information about clergy who have joined us since we last gathered, and I call upon the Reverend Canon Michael Ambler, Canon to the Ordinary.
Thank you, Bishop. It took a minute to find the unmute button. One of the things that I do as Canon to the Ordinary that is a particular delight is that I get to accompany congregations as they are searching for new clergy and accompany clergy as they are finding new places to minister. Since our last convention, we've had a number of comings and goings. We celebrate the comings, we regret the goings, but here are the people who are new in charge of congregations or serving in congregations. The Reverend Elaine Hughes is now priest in charge of St. Brendan the Navigator in Deer Isle. The Reverend Kevin Kinsey, a longtime member of this diocese and friend, is now serving an additional congregation. He is serving Good Shepherd in Holton in conjunction with the Arista Cluster, which he continues to serve. The Reverend Katie Hollicky, newly ordained, is now serving as assistant at St. Paul's in Brunswick. The Reverend Laura White is priest in charge of St. Martin's in Palmyra. The Reverend Ryan Males is rector of St. George's in York Harbor. The Reverend Brent Wass is rector of St. Francis by the Sea in Blue Hill. The Reverend Tom Rock is rector of Good Shepherd in Rangeley. The Reverend Lynn Carter Edmonds is the transitional priest in charge at St. Albans in Cape Elizabeth. And the Reverend Jean Kavanaugh is serving as deacon at St. George's, Sanford. And the Reverend Jared Talbot is serving as deacon at St. James in Old Town. We also bade farewell to several of our friends over the course of this year. The Reverend Tim Boggs retired from St. Albans in Cape Elizabeth. The Reverend Susan Krause retired from St. Giles in Jefferson. The Reverend Larry Weeks retired from Trinity Church in Portland, as well as St. Peter's in Portland. And the Reverend Mary Bourke retired as deacon from St. Matthew and St. Barnabas in Hollowell. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We say welcome to those of you who are joining us in a new way. And we say thank you to those of you who have completed your service in that way, but continue to serve in other ways. Before we move to the next item of business, I want to respond to a question about the United Thank Offering. I am very aware that most of us are not worshiping in the way that we are used to, or at least in the way that we did before March. And so a question has been posed about, well, what do I do with my UTO box that I'm not actually able to go to church? There are a couple of things. One is to just continue to be thankful every day and to fill up the UTO box. And if it gets too full, you can create a basket, and you can have more than one. And when there is an ingathering at your church, which might happen before the end of this year or next year, you will get the prize because your many UTO boxes will lead the way. The second thing is to go to the website at episcopalmaine.org and to click on the donate button and then find United Thank Offering and simply to make your gift there. So thank you very much. I call now upon the co-chair of Diocesan Council, the Reverend Canon Nancy Moore, to announce the 2020 to 2022 lay reps to Diocesan Council as elected at Area Caucus held earlier this week on the 13th. Canon Moore?
Is there a slide with this one? There we go.
There is.
As you can see from the slide on your screen, from Area 1, Aroostook County, Ms. Nancy Moores. Yes, it gets confusing. From Area 2, Hancock and Washington County is Ms. Rita Redfield. From Area 3, Piscataquis and Penobscot County, Ms. Christine Talbot. From Area 4, Franklin, Oxford, and Androscoggin counties, Ms. Melissa Sparks. From Area 5, Kennebec and Somerset counties, Mr. Stephen Ward. From Area 6, Sagadahoc, Lincoln, Knox, and Waldo counties, Mr. Thomas Ward. From Area 7, Cumberland County, Mr. Fred Fowler. From Area 8, York County, Ms. Holly Sargent.
Thank you very much, and thank you to each of you who are serving in that way. Your faithfulness and your encouragement and your leadership mean everything. We move now to consideration of the 2021 budget, and I invite the Reverend Lael Sorensen, Chair of the Diocesan Finance Committee, to present. And after she makes her presentation, I will then introduce the Treasurer of the Diocese, Mr. Richard Rosine. Lael?
Thank you, Bishop Brown, very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We've had a number of conversations in the town halls regarding the budget for 2021, and I believe Katie's going to get us some slides up shortly. But I just want to walk you through the major points, if I can, please, before we turn to the business of voting for this budget. The first off, this is a budget that was developed initially by the Finance Committee and presented to Diocesan Council in September, and then presented to you all through the town halls and now here. And we have a number of goals. The first, so thank you very much. We have a number of goals. First, to present a balanced budget, and you'll all may recall that the way we develop a budget in the Diocese of Maine is that we begin with our income, we figure out what that is, and then we determine what expenses are. Our goal at the end is to have a budget that has a zero balance, which is to say expenses equal our income. We do not have deficit budgets at the diocesan level. So the first was to work within the resources we have, as we have before. It's based on the parochial reports of 2019, and to have that be balanced. Another goal is to honor our past commitments to the national church, to providing Bishop Brown his funding for robust staff. It's robust funding for staff, and that included, as many of you know, the hiring of new folk, including Katie Clark, who's helping me with these slides. Thank you, Katie. We also want to keep our commitments, past commitments to program and to the wider church, and to the initiatives that had begun in our local communities. We also wanted to expand our diocesan commitment to justice, economic justice, racial reconciliation, and perhaps even especially from the council, because we had spent so much time with the Committee on Indian Relations. We were particularly sensitive to justice with Indigenous peoples within our state. We also seek in this budget to improve and expand, so give monies for online infrastructure at the diocesan level. This is for not just our website and improvements to our website, but also database gathering for a wide variety of purposes. All of that is essential, as we've discovered really over the last 6 months because of this pandemic. That infrastructure, that digital infrastructure is very, very important. And finally, I wrote here, we need to make lemonade. We sought to make lemonade out of pandemic lemons. And by that, I really mean we have discovered, as all of us, I think, have over the last 7 months, that Zoom, among other things, and that I don't just mean Zoom, but I mean also live streaming worship, and a variety of online mechanisms, including funding and gathering of checks and pledges online. All of that, many of us have stepped into, and it has made, in some ways, our lives really much, much better. In particular, we were thinking about the lemonade of Zoom, in meaning that costs of gathering, as much as we like gathering for meetings, including conventions, the costs of gathering, both in terms of our time and our resources for cars to get to wherever we're going and hotel rooms, all of that could be saved. And that was an important insight. And in fact, Diocesan Council itself said, we kind of don't care what happens, whether there's a vaccine or what happens in the future. We really want to commit to having some of our meetings, not all of them, but some of our meetings be online going forward. So that's what I mean by making lemonade out of pandemic lemons. Let's take a look at the next slide with the big picture. Our total budget is $1,841,423. We will be maintaining the assessment rate of 15%. And as Treasurer Dick Rosine is going to tell you about this, but you might as well hear it here first, that assessment amount is dependent again upon the 2019 normal operating income. That's what NOI stands for. And it's based on this calculus: 5% of the first 10,000 of normal operating income and 15% on the remaining NOI as reported in your parochial report. So that's how assessment is evaluated. How important is assessment? Let's take a look at the next slide if we can. Remember, I said we begin with our income. And as you can see, not unlike parishes, there are endowments and some other income that we have as a part of the diocese, but in the same way that often at the parish level, pledges are terribly important for the life of the parish, so parish assessments are important to the life of the diocese. It's the single largest section. The other is, again, miscellaneous income and summer chapels, which we are always grateful for their donations, but they have no obligation to make any kind of contribution. So that is we're very grateful, but we tend to be conservative in measuring what that amount might be. And so that's why that section is much, much smaller. Let's take a look at, so that's how we get our money. What do we do with it? Well, there are basically now 4 areas, and I'm going to talk about each one in turn. But again, not unlike a parish. For those of you in parishes, the single greatest expenditure in a parish is the money you give to the rector and the staff. So, and we see this recorded here. But there are also 4 important areas that really speak to the mission and ministry of this diocese. And what for me always is the most, in some ways, the most exciting thing, and that is what's happening on the ground in terms of what we're doing with all of this money. So these 4 categories: enlightening our hearts, answering the call, knowing the hope, and claiming our inheritance, are just ways of grouping our various expenditures. Let's take a look at the first one, enlightening our hearts. This refers to our support of at the diocesan level for justice, advocacy, and outreach ministries. And it includes the brand new Commission on Justice, which now sort of combines a variety of things, including the Committee on Indian Relations and Multicultural Awareness. That's what those funny little, that's what CIR and M-C are, is Committee on Indian Relations and Multicultural Awareness. It includes our support of international and domestic outreach projects, a variety of other project and network incubators. I think about music or about Christian education. That has actually been a particularly powerful one for during the pandemic. What are people sharing about how they are dealing with children during this pandemic? It includes support for the Episcopal Peace Fellowship, our Jubilee Centers, and 2 new projects that both received grants from Mission Priorities, World Too Beautiful and Arise Portland. I'll talk, well, maybe, World Too Beautiful is essentially an earth conscious gathering / service at the cathedral. It grows out of their experience of living local. It's very exciting. And Arise Portland, which is, again, a way of gathering folks for meaning, including spiritual meaning in their lives, particularly targeting people who are not drawn or who actively reject and feel hurt by traditional worship. So it's terribly important outreach. That's what Enlightening Our Hearts has supported. Answering the Call. is about supporting faith formation. That includes youth ministry programs and events, Camp Bishopswood, the Christian Ed Collaborative again, adult formation, and EFM, and anything else that sort of falls under that category of faith formation. Another category is knowing the hope. And this is, I suppose in some ways, it's resources for congregations and for clergy. We know, of course, that there are newly ordained priests among us. Welcome. If this is your first gathering as a convention, as a priest of this diocese, I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations to you, and we are delighted to have you in our midst. It also includes, so the importance of clergy and clergy support formation is very important, but it also includes things at the congregational level. And for that, I think about new initiative grants. There were a number this year, even during the pandemic. For example, the fabulous project from St. Paul's in Brunswick to provide affordable housing for low-income or new Mainers. St. Mark's in Waterville applied for a grant for a labyrinth, and there's an essentials pantry in Rumford. I mean, learning about these projects is really awesome. That came from new initiatives. Strategic mission support is our support for congregations, as you know, that would otherwise perhaps not exist, clergy support for congregations that cannot support yet a clergy full-time or even part-time and need diocesan help, and which meet a certain criteria. They're the only ones in a certain area. And without them, there would not be a sacramental presence for those faithful Episcopalians, and we want to support them. And finally, there were a series of, again, mission priorities grants. I already talked about World Too Beautiful and Arise Portland, but those kinds of projects are very exciting. And it's nice to know that your assessment has helped make all of those things work. The next category is claiming our inheritance. This is about, our participation in the national church, our relations with the Lutherans, preparing, as we always do, putting aside money for General Convention, for a delegation to go to General Convention, to prepare for travel for Lambeth. We don't know quite what will happen with that, but also a variety of diocesan level meetings, diocesan council meetings, and standing committee meetings, and the diocesan audit. Now, those are our big ways. Those are the things we really spend our money on. And if we could take a look at that next slide, Katie. So again, you see sort of lightening our hearts, answering the call, knowing the hope, and claiming our inheritance. And it says this big chunk is Loring House staff. And I said, I'm always very keen on this, that this does not represent really what we do. So I took the salaries of the Loring House staff, recognizing that the vast majority of their work was in fact facilitating enlightening our hearts, answering the call, knowing the hope, and claiming our inheritance, and rejiggered what it might look like. And so if we could look at the next one, that's really how it looks. So Loring House expenses are the maintenance of the building, of the archive, and the salary that works for the archive, and also things like, I didn't include insurance or health insurance or pension. I probably should have for staff salaries, but I just wanted you to have a sense of this is a diocese that really cares about mission and ministry on the ground. We want to support the staff, we want to support the bishop, but their efforts in turn are largely redirected towards all of us. What you have before you is a budget that does all of those things. And I wonder if there are any questions from anyone at this point. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Lael. Are there questions for the chair of the Finance Committee? You can simply raise your hand or unmute yourself and pose your question.
Bishop Liz McMullen of Northeast Harbor has raised her hand.
Thank you, Liz. Please proceed.
Bishop Brown, I have a global question about the budget, which is we have held together financially this year, primarily driven by the fact that we had pledges from last year before COVID came into place. And we are therefore not suffering in general in our parish, but I don't know what's happening in the rest of the diocese. I suspect we are perhaps more fortunate than other parishes, particularly those that are so much more reliant on plate income. And I'm afraid, because we haven't had a service since March, that we're going to see a slippage in 2021 that's going to be far greater than perhaps 2020. And my question is, what kind of thoughts has the diocese as a whole thought about? Because certainly at over 14% of our budget goes to our diocesan assessment. What kind of processes in place or thoughts are in place about if things don't turn out to be sort of business as usual, what kind of reaction would be put into place to relieve the burden on those parishes that are having significant revenue shortfalls? And this assessment will not be 15%, it'll be more like 20, 25%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Liz, I think you are asking a question that is probably on the minds of every single one of us, that there is so much uncertainty. And I'm going to ask Lael to respond, but before she does, what I would say initially is for all of us to bear in mind that what is before us this morning is a proposed budget. And what we believe is that we won't know, you won't know, and we won't know much more for the next couple of months. We expect that at the December Diocesan Council meeting, that we may need to make adjustments to this, and we will communicate that to you. And we expect that every Diocesan Council meeting for the next couple of years is going to not only consider this global question that you're asking about in terms of the future, but also to respond specifically to each of you, the faith communities, to respond in ways that allow us to continue recognizing that we may need to adjust very quickly and to be responsive to your changing ground. So as you say, some of our faith communities may emerge from this very strong and others may not. And so we rely on you to communicate with us so that we can be responsive to you. Lael, I wonder if you have anything to add.
Thank you, Bishop Brown. Yes, I do. I didn't make it as part of my presentation, but I agree. And I've said in the town hall, so I have a narrow financial answer for you, Liz, and not the broader answer. It has implications for the broader answer, but the narrow one. As we sat down to do this budget, we were in the middle of sheltering in place when we were thinking about this. And we didn't know what the impact of that would be. One of the things we decided, though, was one, we didn't want to panic. We didn't know what was going to happen, and we really needed data. And so for now, for next year, we decided, let us go ahead and develop a budget as we have in the past, which is based on the parochial report of 2 years prior. But Canon Terry Reimer will be sending out in the next week, or next 2 weeks anyway, a notice to virtually all treasurers asking for a report on revenues January through September. We need the data to be able to do that. So in part, what we're trying to do is two things. One is to follow the procedure we've had, but also to develop ways of responding more swiftly. So I do expect that there may be adjustments to this budget that come to Diocesan Council in December. But I also agree that learning all of this and learning its impact is not something we're going to know right away. It's important to have the data, it's important to have the research, And it's important to have a team that is prepared to focus on this. And I know that the bishop has called on members of diocesan council to begin thinking about whether or not they want to be part of such a team that will help congregations that find themselves under a certain amount of financial stress. I mean, certainly the finance committee has done that in the past. We sort of routinely do that. That's why strategic mission support comes through finance and a variety of other ways, other mechanisms, other congregations that might find themselves in financial stress. So I'm glad you asked it. I really am. I think the best answer for right now is we need the data. Let's look at the data, and then we can proceed, knowing that we might need to change in the future. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Lael, and thank you, Liz, for that question. Are there other questions for the chair of the Finance Committee?
I see no other raised hands, Bishop. Oh, Timothy Rector from St. Mark's has now raised his hand.
I do have one comment to make. It has to do with what Ben Chamba has indicated. St. Mark's in Waterville, I'm the one who deals with the income that comes in on a weekly basis. And it seems to me that it, in fact, this year has been artificially high as a result of the pandemic. We've asked people to make their pledges and that type of thing. And the amount of revenue that's come in has been, for the first 9 months of the year, perhaps higher than it would have been in a normal year. So that does skew the result, or that may skew the results that Terry Reimer is going to get when he gets the report from us, and I expect from other parishes as well.
Thank you very much for that important comment, and I want to also acknowledge Dean Shambo's comment in the chat, which refers to the fact that many of our faith communities engaged in the payroll protection program from the federal government. We were able to do that as a diocesan-wide application, and it made a huge difference for many of our churches. Some of our churches elected not to participate in that, either because they feel like they had resources of their own, or because they didn't think that they should engage in that kind of government program. So it is true that anticipating income for 2021, it would be wonderful for us to know that. I think that many of our churches simply don't even know how to plan for that. I think that we continue to respond in the moment. And for those of you who particularly are engaged in the financial leadership of your faith community, to make sure that your diocesan council rep is connected to you, and we will do everything we can to connect ourselves to you so that we continue in dialogue and continue to share information. Are there other comments or questions?
Bishop Canon Reimer has raised his hand.
Thank you very much, Canon Reimer.
So I think what we found in discussions with congregations is and discussions with my counterparts in the other parts of Province 1, the New England Diocese, has been that pledge income has been, as has been discussed, either equal to or slightly greater than had been anticipated or what had been budgeted for. The areas of income that have taken the biggest hits are essentially the supplemental income, special events income. A number of our churches have a great deal of responsibility to their congregation, and they conduct fetes, they conduct dinners, they take advantage of the summer months to do these special events that bring in a sizable portion of their income. That did not happen this summer. The other element is that with summer visitors to a number of our churches drastically reduced because of lack of in-person worship, that particular element of non-pledge income is reduced. The other element, of course, that seems to be holding firm and might hold firm going into next year is endowment related income. To the extent that churches are not required or by their financial situation to tap on endowment or savings income, that the income will continue pretty much as it has been over the past couple years. The one area that that we find that there's been a substantial hit has been what you might call special gifts. And a number of our churches do receive anywhere from 10 to 20% of their budgeted income from special gifts, and that hasn't materialized in a lot of our churches. That is why we want to get actual information for 9 months in 2020 and compare that to 2019 income. Because if it is as we anticipate that those areas of non-pledge income are drastically reduced, then we'll put our heads together and submit a way in which we can adapt our budget to recognize that that 21 income might be repetitive of what we've seen in 2020. The one element that I would remind you of is that the online worship and the online capacity of churches to be community, to reach out, whether it's on prayer groups, whether that's Zoom Bible studies or whatever, has solicited and created a demand for those services that are reflected in online giving. That's an element that we did not experience too much in 2019, and will probably experience quite a bit in 2020, and will increase into 2021. So there's a countervailing impact as well as a result of the pandemic. And to the extent that you're reaching beyond the geographic borders of your parish, you'll see that impact in 21, especially as we put more money into grants that allow churches to develop the technology to do these online services. We'll see that as a counterweight. So those are the streams that are wading through this. Those are the threads that are making up this blanket for us. And we will want to use the information that we gather and glean from our churches to develop a reasonable approach to how we approach 2021. And that could result in some way means of supporting congregations either on an as-need basis or a blanket basis in terms of assessment. So I would say that what we're asking you to approve in terms of the budget is in essence sort of the starting point for a larger discussion that, as the bishop has said, not only is now, but it will extend into 2021 and 2022. So with that, I want you to have a little insight into what our thoughts are. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you very much to all of you. There are still some more questions. I call on Mother Johansson from St. Dunstan's in Ellsworth.
Thank you so much. And I just want to congratulate everybody on the brilliant job you've done on this. Regarding the justice part of the budget, supporting that, I feel strongly that the issue of justice for women be noted for that committee and for money spent on it. For instance, and the reason I bring it up on budget issues is justice by virtue of women not making as much money as men. I also bring it up with concern that women have the right to determine what happens to their own bodies. And I did not see that included in the list of things that were stated before. But I just wanted to bring that up and say that I think that that's a really, really important thing for us to be considering. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I call on Mr. Rick Mack.
Thank you, Bishop. Rick Mack from Gardner, Christchurch. There's been a lot of talk of the shifting sands of the pandemic, and obviously will have an impact on our income. And this is kind of obvious, but I did want to just put out there that besides perhaps reconsidering how much income we're getting, how we're going to get it, and so forth, there might be shifting sands of how we're going to spend that money. We don't know, as all along, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. And just sort of related, but this morning, like probably a lot of you, I belong to AARP. They sent out the newsletter this morning, and a sobering statistic: 1/2 of the nursing homes in this country, 1/2 of the staff is COVID-19 positive. That's a big impact in our society, and there's probably other things as we go along that when we see what funds we have, we may want to reconsider how we spend the money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions or comments about the budget?
I see no hands raised, Bishop.
Thank you very much. I call on the treasurer, Mr. Richard Rosine.
Thank you, Bishop. I want to add my own personal thanks to the Finance Committee members, especially Lael for her leadership, and to Terry for his guidance and support as we've worked through these troubling times. I would also say that one of the things the Finance Committee has done over this past year is try to be in touch with local treasurers to see how they're doing. And it's our hope that we will continue to broaden those relationships so that treasurers have a one-to-one relationship with members of the Finance Committee that we can bring to our deliberations as we move forward. Having said that, you notice that part of Lael's presentation, she talked about a yearly audit that we pay for. It's part of our canonical responsibilities to conduct this audit, so that I am pleased to report that in accordance with Canon 7, Section 1, I certify as the treasurer that the accounts under the authority of the convention for calendar year 2019 have been audited in accordance with Canon 18, Section 1, subparagraph 5. Therefore, I move that the 201st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine approves the 2021 budget as recommended by the Finance Committee and Diocesan Council. I also have a second motion that the 201st Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine approve the 2021 assessment rate of 5% of the first $10,000 of normal operating income, commonly referred to as NOI, and 15% of the remaining NOI as reported on the 2019 Rotary report. My third motion is that the 2021 Episcopal rate be continued at $1.75 per communicant in good standing as reported on the 2009 Rotary report. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I recognize that some of his audio was difficult to hear, so I'm just going to recap and remind you that you will be asked in just a moment to vote on the budget as recommended, on the assessment rate of 5% on the first 10,000 of your NOI, and 15% on the remaining, as reported on your 2019 parochial report, and also an Episcopate rate be continued as it was last year of $1.75 per communicant. If you are ready to vote, I will ask now for the poll to be presented before you. With thanks to all the people, I see lots of thanks in the chat for all of you leaders. This comes to us from a committee, so it needs no second. The polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
Bishop, for the record, I report that the resolution to adopt the 2021 budget assessment rate and Episcopate rate as recommended by Diocesan Council, passes by a wide margin with 225 votes in favor and 3 votes against. Thank you, Bishop.
Excellent. Thank you to all of you. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness. I'm grateful to those of you who raised questions, whether they were particularly about money or whether they were about justice concerns. I'm mindful that each of us comes today with passion, and each of us comes with desire for our church to be strong. And I'm grateful for each of you, even for those of you who didn't come to the microphone and say things, that we've just done an important piece of work together. It is 10:41, and I wonder if you would indulge yourself in taking not 15 minutes, but 19 minutes of a break. We were scheduled to have 15 minutes, but we're doing well. And I think that there are many things for you to do this morning. It might be that you want to get something to eat, or you might want to do something fun, but you have 19 minutes to do it. We stand in recess and we will reconvene now 18 minutes at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Don't log off.
Don't log off.
Don't log off. That's a
Please
very
don't
important
log
thing.
off.
All you need to do is stop your video and stop your audio.
Good morning, folks. We have just under a minute before we start again. As you get settled back for session number 2, please make sure that your microphone is muted, that your chat window is open, that your camera angle is good so that we can see your lovely faces. And don't forget to use the raised hand function if you need to speak to something on the floor. Yes, Nancy Moore, that indeed is my magic wand. Do you remember at Town Hall, we asked what people would miss, and the answer was hugs, the magic wand, and chocolate. So I send you all a virtual hug. The wand is back there, and so is a nice candy jar full of chocolate. So virtually, I'm offering you a chocolate and a hug.
Friends, welcome back. It's wonderful to see you. It's 11 o'clock. We begin now our second session of this 201st convention, and we move to 4 resolutions that will be presented by the Committee on Resolutions, chaired by the Reverend Carolyn Eklund. And I will call upon her now to begin this work with resolution number 5.
Thank you, Bishop, and I thank the committee, the Reverend Calvin Sanborn and the Honorable Marge Kilkelly and John Hennessy, our staff liaison. Thank you so much. And you will recall that resolutions 1 through 4 we just included in the consent calendar we accepted earlier. So now we have resolution number 5, support for the authors of a letter to the Church on breaking white supremacy. This is submitted by the Justice Commission of the Diocese of Maine. The Resolutions Committee moves resolution number 5, and I call on the Reverend Eleanor Pryor to speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Carolyn. This resolution is to support a letter that was written on what we celebrate as a country Independence Day. And it was titled Speaking of Freedom, as the resolution title says, a letter to the Church about breaking free of white supremacy. The idea is to take a stance as a diocese that we support moving forward in a greater way than we have previously towards racial justice in this country. As you know, following the death of the brutal murder of George Floyd, a movement was reinvigorated. And as the Church, as the people of the Diocese of Maine, we want to engage more broadly in this work towards true freedom for all people in this country.
Thank you, Eleanor. We're taking questions now, comments. Floor is open. Bishop.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm seeing no questions for us to consider or to hear, and therefore I take it that we might be ready to vote. Thank you. Ms. Kittler, yes, Ms. Kittler from the Church of Our Father in Hulse Cove. Please proceed.
I would like to make a statement. There is too much in speaking of freedom with which I disagree for me and many of my congregation to support this letter. It quotes Frederick Douglass speaking in 1852, a worship that can be conducted by persons who refuse to give shelter to the houseless, to give bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked, is a curse to mankind. The Episcopal Church I have known since birth supports care to those in trouble through Episcopal Relief and Development and others. Locally, our churches support clothing distribution, food pantries, homeless shelters, and hospitals. I see us as a blessing. The point of this letter with which I most disagree is its presentation of, quote, whiteness, unquote. For me, and most of the members of my congregation, whiteness is indeed not, quote, a benign construct, unquote. It is the color of our skin. It does not dictate what we think or do. We do not claim superiority nor desire to subjugate, appropriate, silence, deport, dehumanize, or eliminate people whose skin is of a different color or who have a different cultural background. To claim that the color of our skin determines our attitudes and actions is just as racist as that which these authors protest. Not all, quote, whites, unquote, are, quote, allied with oppression, unquote. The authors encourage us to, quote, let go, unquote. What do they want us to let go of? They say, quote, people of color must refuse the tantalizing pull to secure the privileges of whiteness, unquote. They do not name these privileges, but let me guess, don't we all want health, economic security, and good education? I would hope freedom would allow the pursuit of these. When the authors say we must protest and witness against white supremacy, I hope they are not thinking of burning businesses owned by people of color in Portland and Seattle. Finally, they ask, quote, can a denomination steeped in white supremacy turn and dedicate its life to dismantling the very structures of death that it blessed and built, unquote. I point out that we have a Black presiding bishop. The 3 priests who wrote this letter are women of color, not to mention the decades of Black bishops and priests who preceded them. I believe we can be a, quote, true community that is based on equality, mutuality, and reciprocity that affirms the richness of individual diversity, unquote, but not with emotional accusations.
Thank you very much.
I would encourage the convention to not support this particular resolution.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes Mr. Edward Ray.
Thank you, Bishop. I am pretty much in support of what the previous speaker said. However, I wanted to focus on 2 other aspects of this resolution. One is we had a question at one of the town meetings as to why the resolution was in support of the authors and not the letter. I take it from the earlier comments that perhaps the understanding was that in supporting the authors, we're also supporting the letter, and I'll go along with that. The letter calls for us to let go of the realities and privileges of whiteness, but offers no idea of what that might entail. How would the Episcopal Church and the Diocese of Maine look and operate differently if they let go? Would the diocesan budget look different? Would the polity of the church change? Without some notion of what our letting go might mean, I believe that the letter is another nice thought without actionable meaning. Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes Andre Appel of St. Paul Church in Brunswick.
Thank you, Bishop. I appreciate Marilyn's and Edward's comments, and I would just offer that in contemplating the letter, that one not personalize the statements, but that one see them as addressing a system rather than individuals. I think that this kind of helps to put the statements of the authors in a different perspective, which may be somewhat easier to accept or understand. I don't think that she is making, or they are making, allegations against any particular person or even any particular church within the Episcopal Church, but rather that there are systemic issues that have created the conditions that they are bringing forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leandra, I think that you would like to be recognized, and if so, you may proceed.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, I'm Leandra Fox Texera. I'm a delegate from St. Michael's in Auburn. Oh, and I apologize, I have a 2-year-old in the background, so if there are noises. Thank you.
It's okay.
So I'm sorry, honey, but can you give Mama a minute, please? So I am a teacher in Auburn as well. And I just wanted, so I read this letter, and as I'm reading it, I considered it more of a call to action rather than pointing fingers and telling the Anglican Church that, you know, we are wrong, or that I don't think that anyone should feel that they should take offense to this. In my head, like I said, it's a call to action. I think about, you know, liberation theology. You know, if we look at Latin America and people like Oscar Romero, that's what I think that this letter is asking for, and not that we should be ashamed of any type of whiteness. I am multiracial. I'm from the Bahamas, so I think this is an issue that most countries deal with. But I think it's kind of important for us to just think about it as like, let's look at what privilege exists in the church, and how we can support people of color in their plight against whatever it is that they may be experiencing, whether that's microaggressions or racism. I don't think that racism is so much happening in the church, right? But I think in the broader community, it's really difficult for us to sit in a church and say, this is not happening, when in reality, it really is. And I apologize, I'm so nervous about talking, so my voice is shaking. But I just think that it's more about like, let's support our communities of color, and let's show them that we are looking inward and looking at these systems and trying to figure out what privilege exists and how we can, and not that we should make anyone feel bad for being white, right? I come from a country where I was considered to be white my entire life, and then I came to the US and I was told that I was Black. So I can tell you that it's a very strange perspective to think that you are a certain race and then you're not, right? So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I am also a history teacher, so this is something that I'm very passionate about. But I just wanted to say that I don't think that this article is meant to feel like an attack. It's meant to say, hey, we are the church and we have huge sway in opinions, and we should speak out and we should look into ourselves. But yes, so I apologize. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bishop, I would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor.
Yes, I just want to interject and remind everybody, and in saying this, I intend no reflection on the very interesting comments that we have heard thus far. There is a 3-minute time limit on speakers, and we will have to enforce that in order to make sure we get our business done within the time allotted to us. I'm keeping time, and I'll have to speak up if people go over 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. There are several people in queue, and we have heard 2 voices in opposition and 2 voices in support. Is there someone in the queue? I see the Reverend Lauren Kay, the Reverend Katie Hollicky, the Reverend Mary Lee Weil, the Reverend Carol Huntington, and the Reverend Laura White. Is there someone who is prepared to speak in opposition? If so, please unmute yourself and proceed.
Bishop, this is Laura White from St. Martin's in Palmyra.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. My concern with this resolution is it feels very focused on the sins of the past and dwelling on things that have happened, perhaps things that our grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, whatever, that they did. And we are an Easter people, and whatever sins have been committed, I would hope that we have we've repented and asked for forgiveness and we've moved on. And I just think it focuses too much on the history and how horrible and wretched people we are, instead of saying, you know what, there are things that need to be corrected. Let's move forward and let's do better. But I'm against it because I just feel like it's so much of oh, we're so horrible and we've done these terrible, horrible, wretched things. And I don't think that's the people that we are as Episcopalians. As the first speaker said, we do a lot. I mean, Episcopalians are known for being very active in the community. We could always do more, but I think we do a lot. And I think we need to focus on what we can do instead of beating our brow over what has been done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was in error when I listed the number of people in queue. And in fact, a lay delegate from Gardner, Mr. Matt Bear Fowler, was first. I recognize him now.
Matt, where are you?
Sorry, I had a little bit of trouble unmuting myself. I didn't expect to come up so soon, so I'm just sort of collecting my thoughts as to where I want to begin. I guess I'll sort of respond to what the last person said first. I think that we have to have ongoing conversations about what has happened in the past, and in fact recognize that the sin of racism and racial violence and white supremacy is not in fact in the past. It is ongoing, and it is something that we need to continually be working on in our own lives as individuals and as a church body. And as far as people spoke with concern about what it means to let go of whiteness and white supremacy and white privilege and so on, it isn't so much that no one's saying that we shouldn't be looking for health and well-being and a certain degree of prosperity and so forth. When we speak of whiteness in this way, in terms of racial justice, we're not suggesting that you can change your skin color or that you should be looking to have a less fortunate life than you have. When we speak of letting go of whiteness in this context, what we're really talking about is the idea that whiteness is a cultural default. That shows up in churches and in spiritual life in such a way that we prioritize theology by white theologians, that we prioritize white cultural ways of looking at God and Jesus and Christianity. And we forget that these are not the human default. There are a lot of different ways to look at spirituality, and we really need to broaden our horizons and stop sort of just letting whiteness and white perspectives be a cultural wallpaper, something which is constantly in our lives and in our background, and has, some effect on us, but we don't really think about it. We need to stop letting that be the wallpaper.
Mr. Bear Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but we need to move on to a next speaker because you have spoken for 3 minutes.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there someone in the queue who would like to speak in opposition? If so, please unmute yourself and proceed. Hearing none, I move now to the Reverend Lauren Kay.
Thank you, Bishop. I just want to note, starting off, that it is a point of privilege for us to decide for any other group of people of which we are not a part that we have done enough for them. The issue of whiteness, white supremacy, white privilege is uncomfortable for most, if not all of us who have white skin. That is just something that I've encountered anytime it comes up. Education is a big part of where that comes in, proximity, what we've encountered, what we've experienced, what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've read. If we have not been deep in the work with these other communities, it can be challenging to decide, again, that we have done enough for them. As was pointed out in terms of what the resolution is calling, with all things, there is a beginning step. And we have our newly formed Racial Justice Council, which is part of the Justice Commission here in the diocese. And this has been among the conversation, and we are the ones who brought this resolution forward. In that, a launching point of the work to be done, and recognizing that the work to be done is different in any congregation. But it all starts somewhere, and this resolution is one of those starting points, at least as I understand it. And again, recognizing that I, in my white skin, cannot decide for any person of color whether or not I've done enough work in terms of justice for their communities. Sins of the past are very present in our current day. They are present in the institutions of our government. They are present in the institution of our church. We can look across and we can say, look at all of these clergy of color, and we have some bishops of color and these other sorts of things. But again, largely, it's groundbreaking that we have only just now had a slate of bishops that is all people of color. Just now in 2020. So this is it's not a bad thing to be white, but white supremacy and what whiteness in the creation of whiteness and racial divide is done is very present as a problem today. So as a launching point, as a stepping off point, this resolution written by people of color in the Episcopal Church to the Episcopal Church is worth noting. And if there are things that are uncomfortable in it, then that's a good place for us to start. I really am grateful for voices that come forward, whether in support or opposition, because all of us are together in this work. And all of us have to be present in this work. And where it's uncomfortable,
Very well.
then let's engage together in that, and let's do the work together. That's what we mostly are about here as the Episcopal Church. And at that point, I will stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you
Call the
very
question.
much. Your chair is aware that several people have spoken, and we have heard voices in support of and in opposition of. And I'm going to suggest now that we take a moment and proceed to vote. So with that, I would ask that the poll be prepared.
Yes, I'm gonna go get my cord.
We are prepared, Bishop.
Polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
Bishop, for the record, resolution number 5 passes 187 votes in favor and 42 votes against. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you who spoke, and thank you for your patience and indulgence for those of you who wanted to, and for whom we needed to move on. We do indeed move on now to Resolution 6, and I call upon the chair of the Committee on Resolutions.
I introduce resolution number 6, and thank you to Teresa Penny, who posted the link to the language of all the resolutions in the chat box. So thank you. And I also want to thank Mike Gleason of St. Patrick's in Brewer, who took the time to let us know of some grammatical suggestions that we will address after the convention. So thanks, Mike, very much. So resolution number 6, support for the covenant of anti-racism. This is submitted by the Justice Commission of the Diocese of Maine. And the Resolutions Committee moves Resolution 6. And I call upon, again, the Reverend Eleanor Pryor to speak to this resolution.
Thank you, Carolyn. The support for the covenant of anti-racism, the covenant was written by the Right Reverend Deion Johnson, Bishop of Missouri. And as the previous resolution speaks to naming the issues that stand in our way towards freedom of all, this is a covenant to root out racism, to move forward. It includes lament and it includes covenanting to real actions. Part of those actions are education, so that we understand how racism is present in ways we cannot see sometimes, and also how to work forward together and work for greater justice. A covenant is a biblical term that we take really seriously to do the hard work and publicly come out with actions addressing these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The resolution is before you. Is there discussion? I'm not hearing or seeing any raised hands, and I take that
Jenny
to
Reese has her hand up.
please proceed.
Thank you. I had a question which arose from a conversation we had at the town hall meeting. The very last thing in the covenant is ... put your own covenant things here. I just wanted to ask the commission if they are working on that, if they have anything that they can tell us that they're proposing to put in there. I think it's very important that we bring this home to ourselves in a very specific way. And I'm sorry that we haven't already proposed something like that that would make it really part of our work today. I don't think we can spend the committee, the whole time, on that basically committee work, but I'd like to hear what you have to say, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, that is at the top of our agenda to define, to draw on this covenant as it was intended to spur us to our work in our diocese and to create our own covenant. So yes, that's one of the first orders of business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the Reverend Nina Pooley at St. Bartholomew in Yarmouth.
Thanks for the question, Jenny. I'm on the Racial Justice Council, and we're going to have one more resolution, I believe, for us, which forms the committee or acknowledges the committee that has been called by the bishop. But our areas of focus are worship, education and programming, advocacy, and our own various forms of internal work. So whatever we can do for justice in terms of action as well. So those are sort of the areas that we're working toward. And we have resources and things to make available. And right now we're waiting in part for our new diocesan website to happen so that we can be more organized in a way that gets everything out to the diocese. But we're very, very excited about all the different angles of this work. And there are a variety of people on the committee, each with their own sort of expertise in these areas. And we'll be asking the diocese, those of you who want to join us in those various areas to join us in the particulars, if that makes sense. Thanks for the question and for your interest.
Thank you very much. The chair wonders whether Marilyn Kittler from the Church of Our Father in Halls Cove wishes to speak. If not, the chair calls on. Go ahead.
Well, who did I get my voice in?
I'm
I
asking
muted
you
or
if you are unmuted, and I'm asking you if you wish to speak. If so, please do.
I do, Bishop. Yeah. I find this resolution to be full of feel-good statements and not very specific. And the one that I find worthy of support is the one in which it says, we covenant to financially support the important work of historically Black colleges and universities. I would like to add to that the schools of education of the indigenous peoples, but I think that is where we need to focus, is on specific action rather than a number of statements that are more abstract.
Thank you very much.
Speak in position.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the Reverend Andrew D'Angelo White at St. David Church in Kennebunk. Just a reminder, go ahead.
With respect, we're sharing 2 devices in our house to comply with convention things, and my microphone is not working. So I'm speaking as under Sarah's, but with my own voice. I'm Andrew D'Angelo White, Rector at St. David's in Kennebunk. I'm speaking in support of this resolution, actually somewhat surprisingly, for some of the same reasons the previous speaker spoke in opposition. I believe that this has a number of concrete steps, and what I appreciated about it are the specific action items, things like investing in businesses owned by people of color, and making concrete realities. Of course, we are not going to be able to completely remake our diocese or our church in one single resolution, but what this this covenant does do is acknowledge and situate ourselves with a series of actions and a series of possibilities and ways to move forward that I think can help us to live into our baptismal promises to seek and serve Christ in all persons and to work for justice and freedom among all people. And so I speak in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair reminds all of us that in the chat right now, there is a reminder and instructions about how to use the raise hand function to speak. The reason that that's important is because there are several people today who are looking at various screens to make sure that we can see you. We want as many of you who are prepared to speak to be able to do so. Is there someone in the queue or who has raised your hand who would like to speak in opposition? If so, please proceed. If not, the chair recognizes Mr. John Bancroft.
Thank you, Bishop. The final bullet in this covenant, I think, is very important because in addition to the critical work of the new council, it really is an open-ended call to all of us as congregations to carefully and thoughtfully consider the conditions in our own community, in our own congregation, and to really look for individual local application. And that will differ from community to community. And this covenant recognizes that important work and actually charges us to carry it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing anybody else with the raised hand function, and there have been speakers on both sides of this. So I'm going to suggest that we proceed to a vote. And if so, I would call on Canon Martin to prepare the ballot for us.
We are prepared.
Thank you very much. The polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
The polls are closing. The polls are closed.
Bishop, for the record, the convention has accepted as presented resolution number 6 with 217 delegates in favor and 13 opposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to each of you who spoke. We move now to resolution number 7, and I call upon the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Bishop. Presenting resolution number 7, Stewardship of Creation of Carbon Offset Program, submitted by the Cathedral Public Policy and Environmental Action Team. The resolution committee moves resolution number 7, and I call upon Liz Parsons to speak to the resolution. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Carolyn. Bishop Brown, members of Diocesan Council, delegates, and assembled guests. It's an honor to introduce Resolution 7. This resolution comes from the Cathedral's Public Policy and Environmental Action Team, as was just noted. In these COVID cloistered days, a resolution focusing on air travel might seem anachronistic. So it's important to note that our team first discussed this in December of last year. At the time, we wanted to do something compatible with Resolution A14, the use of carbon offsets that the National Church's Advisory Council presented at the most recent General Convention. Since we were between times in our diocesan convention process, Bishop Brown decided to give our draft resolution a trial run by implementing a carbon offset policy for all Loring House-related air travel. Then early this year, Father Tom Moosen experimented with offsetting carbon used for travelers on the pilgrimage he led. In this case, funds collected went to a national nonprofit running carbon offset programs around the world. You will note, however, that we propose keeping carbon offset funds here in the diocese. There are several reasons for this, one being the ability to ensure funds contributed go to programs that really do help reduce carbon emissions. Another reason for proposing this way of doing things is that the diocese already has some established structures that could serve as models for any program we would set up to administer funds. Finally, keeping the money here would, as Tom Moosen has said, create a more visible effect for people who are traveling. And this comment brings us to the underlying reason for proposing the program, acknowledging how all God's creation is so interconnected. You can peruse specific rationale points in your convention material, so I'll only say here that for residents of this wealthy nation, the detrimental effects of fossil-fueled travel have long been invisible to us. This is no longer true. Serendipitously, the coronavirus has revealed that a good quality life is possible without all the moving about to which we'd become accustomed. But if the airline industry returns to pre-pandemic levels, adopting this resolution now will represent another incremental step along the path of our living more harmoniously with the rest of God's creation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It comes to us from the committee and it needs no second. Is there any additional discussion?
Question?
Please proceed.
What, given an average for the last 3 years or so, what is just an off the top of your head guess at what this would cost in dollar terms per year?
Would you like me to address that?
Please.
For a person, I can just use some of my own personal experience, and then I can speak to what Father Moosen experienced when he did it. I only now travel in cases of family emergency, travel by air. And the last time I had to do that was a round trip to Chicago, and my carbon offset was about $20. In the case of the pilgrimage, the amount collected from all individual travelers was $200.
Thank you very much. There are 3 people in the queue. I wonder if any of you would like to speak in opposition of this. If so, please proceed.
Thank you, Bishop. I believe this resolution is largely symbolic. I do not believe parishes in Maine incur substantial air travel costs. In an ever more global world where national and international collaboration is critical, limiting air travel is inconsistent and potentially harmful. If the goal is to reduce the Diocese of Maine's carbon footprint and raise funding for climate justice initiatives, it would be far more effective to apply these carbon charge provisions to reimburse car travel. Therefore, I am recommending voting not in favor of this resolution.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Carlos is from St. Thomas Church in Camden, and I failed to recognize him by name beforehand, and we need that for the official record. I call now upon Robert Stoddard of St. Albans in Cape Elizabeth.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you all, and thank you, Liz, for introducing this resolution, which I'm speaking in favor of. I'm conditioning that support, though, on the fact we are keeping the money within the diocese and within the diocesan budget. As a member of the Energy Working Group of the Maine Climate Council, I'm keenly aware of the need for the state to act towards the governor's net zero goal of 2045 in all possible ways. And I think this is one piece of an important step for the diocese to show not merely symbolically, but tangibly, the need for stewardship of our environment. By keeping the money within the state and particularly within the diocese, though, we recognize that first we can have real accountability for it. There are substantive concerns about some of the programs for carbon offsets on a national or international basis. And I think by keeping it inside programs that we have a direct oversight on, we can be much more responsible stewards of that money and ensure that it serves not only the environmental goals, but also the associated racial justice goals and equity goals within the state. So I encourage you to vote in favor of the resolution.
Thank you very much. I call upon Marilyn Brower.
Mute myself. Thank you, Bishop. I just have a question, really. It seems like we're talking about money being used for various stuff. I'm wondering whose money, and I'm wondering if there are budget implications for this resolution, and how will those implications be addressed? And that's really my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I could call upon you, Liz Parsons, to answer that.
I'll give it a try, Bishop. That part could be open to interpretation by diocesan leadership. Our thought had been, first of all, if as a way of inspiring everybody in the diocese to engage in this sort of thing, So, and as we've seen from some of the information in the chat, it's not a whole lot of money. The original thought for keeping it in the diocese came from one of our team members who suggested using the money to plant trees, having youth groups plant trees or something. So again, we're not talking about large projects here, not a lot of money. It might be that to even get the fund started, we would need to do some fundraising, and I'm sure some of us would be willing to do that. But again, this is a small step along the way, and one sort of process that we could begin implementing. And I'm a big fan of learning as we go. So Bishop, I don't know if that helps, but if there's anything else I can do, I'll try to help.
Thank you very much. Marilyn, let me just put you on the spot. Does that help you?
Well, yes and no. I'm wondering where the money is going to come from. Is it going to come out of the diocese budget, or is it going to be the individual congregations, especially with the travel for Loring House staff? Is there a line item for that? So that's my question.
Thank you. Terry Reimer, I call upon you as the Canon for Finance and Stewardship. Can you speak about the budget?
I think what was discussed here was in terms of diocesan staff travel, which we do have a line item for. And the question will be that whether or not the treasurer and the finance committee of council decides whether or not any carbon offset money will be segregated and disclosed separately from just travel in total. So, you know, that can be a decision that's made downstream, but the money itself will be reserved for that specific purpose. It's going to be considered to be a donor designated gift is essentially what it is. And so it will be restricted to uses as determined by the Justice Commission.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the Reverend Jennifer Reese.
Thank you, Bishop Brown. I'm speaking in favor of this resolution, but I also have a concern, which is that to me, it seems like a small piece, as has been pointed out, of a huge and tremendously important challenge that faces all of us in Maine and across the nation and across the world. And I would like to see, frankly, a comprehensive Green New Deal kind of thing for the Diocese of Maine to propose, so that our individual churches and our individual ministries may have some guidelines as to how to combat climate change and adjust to climate change in the 21st century with some kind of comprehensive guidance. And I don't see where that's happening in the diocese. If it is happening, please let me know, and I can be part of it. I think it's a very important issue that we should be working on, not in little pieces, but in some sort of a broader context, because it is so important to all, and we should be in the leadership of this as the church as we care for creation. Does anybody have a sense of what's happening in the diocese around this topic, and who is working on this?
Thank you very much, Jenny. We will respond to your specific question. We appreciate your comments. I'm going to move now to ask whether the next two speakers, one of whom is Ed Ray from St. Albans in Cape Elizabeth, and the other is Michael Gleason at St. Patrick's in Brewer. Are either of you prepared to speak in opposition of this? If so, please proceed.
I'm not. I just don't know how to get rid of my blue hand, I guess.
Oh, right. That's quite all right. That's true for so many of us. Recognizing that we have had speakers in
Bishop?
favor and seeing,
Bishop?
Go ahead, Mr. Ray.
I'm not really speaking in opposition, but I am just saying that this, at this point in time, is largely symbolic, and that if this carbon offset program is important, as I think it probably should be for the diocese, then it ought to be a budget line item of some sort. And in addition to this offset fee, but it ought to be raised to that level of importance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reminding us of a possible way for us to make this transparent and to report it. I'm going to suggest, not seeing any more folk in the queue, that we proceed to a vote. And I'll ask Ken and Martin to prepare the ballot.
Resolution number 7 is ready for a vote, Bishop.
Thank you. Polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
Bishop, in the matter of resolution number 7, this convention votes in favor of the Stewardship of Creation Carbon Offset Program with 207 votes and 25 votes opposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call upon the chair of the committee to present to us the next resolution, number 8.
Thank you, Bishop. Resolution number 8, resolution denoting the formal support of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine for LD 2094, an act to implement the recommendations of the Task Force on Changes to the Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act. And this is submitted by the Episcopal Committee on Indian Relations. The Resolutions Committee moves resolution number 8. And I call upon John Diefenbacher-Krall to speak to this resolution. Thank you, John.
I speak in support of resolution number 8. We Episcopalians pledge at baptism to strive for justice among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. The Wabanaki, the people of the Dawn Land, the original peoples and nations that lived and remain today in the land settlers now call the state of Maine, suffered and experienced an ongoing colonial invasion supported by the concept of the doctrine of Christian discovery and domination that gave legal and moral support to an immoral occupation and genocide. Our diocese in 2007, via resolution number 2, and the Episcopal Church through resolution D035 in 2009, repudiated the doctrine of Christian discovery and domination. At the 172nd convention of this diocese in 1991, those voting instructed all its members and congregations to get to know the Native American people of Maine, to learn about their histories, cultures, values, and yearnings, and join with them. At that same convention, people voted to create a committee to assist in this effort. This body was originally known as the Native American Project and eventually became the Committee on Indian Relations that Bishop Lane appointed me to lead on February 15th, 2017. The Committee on Indian Relations has dutifully executed that charge given to us in 1991 and subsequently amplified by diocesan resolutions passed in 1992 and 1993. We have formed strong relationships with Wabanaki citizens and their governments. What we have learned during the Committee on Indian Relations' 29 years of existence is that the Wabanaki yearn for what all God's children want: freedom. They want their inherent right to self-determination recognized and respected. They want to fulfill their duties and responsibilities to all of creation in this beautiful place now called Maine, to live as people of this land, which they indisputably are, They need their governmental powers freed from the continuing colonial oppression of the state of Maine. The Executive Council of the Episcopal Church resolved in February 1989 that the Episcopal Church respect and affirm the dignity of Native Americans and call upon its member dioceses to analyze and reflect upon differing effects that colonialism has brought to our various people, colonizer and colonized. Faithful to that call, the Committee on Indian Relations has done that analysis. The Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act is perpetuating the colonial oppression of Wabanaki peoples, disregarding the inherent dignity of the Wabanaki and turning away from Christ's great commandment to love our neighbor. A legislative task force comprised of state legislators, all 5 Wabanaki chiefs.
John,
yes.
John, I'm so sorry, but you have reached 3 minutes and we need to move on. John will be available for questions as we proceed to additional discussion. I'd like to call now on Mr. Carlos Mello of St. Thomas in Camden, who I believe has an amendment to put before us. Carlos?
Thank you. As raised in the last town hall meetings, current legislation is likely to not be taken up as a bill and it will be dissolved. Therefore, I'm recommending a friendly modification to attach at the end of the title, which would be or substantially similar legislation undertaken by the 130th Maine legislature.
Thank you very much. The amendment is before you to change this resolution as proposed. Is there a second? If so, you can simply type the word second in the chat. There's been a second. Thank you very much. Carlos, you may speak to your amendment.
I think it's fairly self-evident by my introduction, but just to say again that under Maine statute, when the current Maine legislature dissolves, its legislation will also, any that has not been ruled on will also dissolve with it. And so that my proposed amendment is to provide a way for us to bridge into the new legislature for the 130th legislation.
Thank you very much. Friends, the proposed amendment that is now in front of us is highlighted on the screen. You'll see it in yellow and in red type. Is there additional discussion on the amendment? We're talking about this amendment. If so, please use your raise hand function in Zoom. I'm not seeing any hands. I call on Ben Shambo at St. Luke Cathedral.
My hand was raised in a comment on the resolution itself, not the amendment.
Thank you, Ben. We will come back to you. Mr. Ray, would you like to speak about the amendment?
The question for the amendment, I think, is the same as the question for the basic resolution, which is we understood at the last town meeting that, or we have heard that the governor and the major legislative leaders are against or would oppose LD 2094. And the question was raised as to why this was and whether that says anything about our support.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Mr. Diefenbacher-Krall of St. James in Old Town and the chair of the committee. Can you help answer that question, please?
Yes. I think that was too sweeping a statement, Mr. Ray, in terms of the status. All of Democratic leadership, so there are 3 Democratic leaders in the Maine House of Representatives, 3 Democratic leaders in the Maine State Senate, strongly support LD 2094. Not absolutely clear where Republican leadership, so they have 2 members in the House of Representatives, 2 in the state Senate. I will note that Kathleen Dillingham, who is the head of the Republicans in the Maine House of Representatives, was a member of the task force and voted for many of the recommendations. So if you go and read the task force report, she was also absent for some of the votes. They voted on each one of the 22 specific recommendations. Governor Mills is not an outright opponent of the overall legislation, but she and some of her key staff have raised concerns about specific provisions. The Committee on Indian Relations, Wabanaki leaders, and many allies of the Wabanaki, have been working to try to engage Governor Mills and her staff on that issue. That, I think, is one of the great tasks before the church, before the Committee on Indian Relations, for everyone who wants to see a more just relationship. I welcome this amendment because the way I drafted this resolution, I wanted to put the diocese on record permanently in support of the task force recommendations. And the Chancellor raised a concern that this convention cannot bind future conventions. So if the Chancellor judges this amendment to be canonically acceptable, I would like us to have this more broader, longer expression of support for the Wabanaki.
Thank you very much, John. I want now to recognize anybody who is prepared to speak to the amendment. And if so, please proceed.
Yes, I just want to make a quick follow-up to John. Lev Sherman, I'm a longtime member of the Committee on Indian Relations. And just to point out that unless we change it even more to make the amendment, to be for any future legislation rather than just for the next legislature, that might be even more emphatic. But I believe John, if I heard John correctly, he was speaking for the committee in that we feel like that the amendment is a positive addition to the resolution. So.
Thank you very much. There have been 2 speakers in favor of the amendment, at least.
Bishop,
yes.
There's possibly a canonical or interpretive question that has been raised, and I thank John Diefenbacher-Kroll for raising it. The question from an earlier version of this resolution was, it could have been interpreted to call on the diocese to agree now to support legislation that didn't yet exist, or amendments that hadn't yet been offered to this legislation, with no limiting parameter around what that future legislation might be. So we were in the position of approving something that without knowing what it really was. The amendment before us now is limited in my judgment in a more acceptable way, because it says that the future legislation that we would be supporting in the next legislature is substantially similar to the existing legislation. That term has legal meaning. Let me also say, for form's sake, that Canon Michael Ambler in the chat has raised an important assumption, which I would like to be part of the record, namely that the new amendment, which appears really in the header for the resolution, would also appear in the operative language in the, in the operative language under the 6th resolve, which actually puts us on record as agreeing to LD 2094. And with that, I'll yield back the time, but I think that should be part of the record as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Thank you, Canon Ambler. The amendment is now before us, and I'll ask Canon Martin to prepare the ballot.
Thank you, Bishop. The ballot is prepared to accept or reject this amendment.
The polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
For the record, the convention has accepted the amendment, 203 votes for and 25 against. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The matter is now amended, and we return now to its amended form. Is there any discussion? Call on you, Dean Shambo.
Yeah, Ben Shambo from the Cathedral. I was honored to be part of the debate and discussion when the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery was approved by our diocese, and then part of the team that took that to General Convention and got to see that passed there. I also, with the bishop, helped represent the diocese at the Martin Luther King Breakfast in Portland this year, an annual event put on by the NAACP. What was striking about that event this year is that the entire focus was on Native American history, Native American stories, and Native American justice, and a real telling as part of the 200th anniversary of the state of Maine of the tragic history of Native American peoples in this state. We often talk about wanting to make a difference and wanting to make structural changes. Part of that, in my own experience, is to take it to the legislature, to really go to Augusta and influence or at least speak towards legislation. So I think this is a powerful way of putting in action some of the earlier resolutions we had today about anti-racism. So I urge you to vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see 3 people in the queue, Bonnie Rodden and Diane Potter and Lev Sherman. Are either of you prepared to speak in opposition of this? If so, please proceed.
I guess I'm opposition.
Then I call upon Bonnie Rodden. Please speak to us.
I am Bonnie Rodden, a delegate from St. Mary the Virgin Church in Falmouth, and also the Episcopal denomination's representative to the Maine Council of Churches. And first, let me thank you for your much appreciated financial contribution to the Council of Churches. We operate on a very slim budget. And in case you're not familiar with the council, it gives Episcopalians a stronger voice in Augusta for social, economic, and environmental justice because the Episcopal Diocese joins with 6 other denominations in advocacy work. As far as this resolution goes, I want to point out that with the support from Bishop Brown, the Council of Churches testified on behalf of LD 2094 earlier this year because it would dramatically improve relations with Maine tribes by giving them the right to govern themselves. And this is a right that tribes have in every state in the nation except for Maine. Yeah. The Diocese Committee on Indian Relations has had an integral role in developing that bill, and our diocese has shown leadership on the national stage as well. Our diocese led the General Convention of the Episcopal Church, as mentioned before, to renounce the principle of Christian denomination over Indigenous people. Yet we still have an egregious wrong in our home state. This resolution is a formal declaration that the legislature should right that wrong, and it will have that opportunity when the legislation is likely to resurface in similar form next year. It is yet another act of leadership by the diocese in the pursuit of social justice, and we give our Native brothers and sisters the sovereignty they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not seeing anybody in the queue who is prepared to speak in opposition, and realizing that we get to live with different rules today, I'm going to suggest that we invoke those rules now and proceed to a vote. We are now voting on the amended form of the resolution, which we have done. We've changed the title and anything else in the body that refers to the title. and the polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. Polls are closed.
Bishop, the results of resolution number 8 as amended are voting in the affirmative 219, 11 voting no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am so grateful to all of you, those of you who spoke, those of you who have been praying, those of you who have been listening. We've just done really important, holy convention work, and for your respect and for your care, for your willingness to engage. Thank you very much. I want to especially say thank you to Carolyn Eklund and to all who have spoken, people who've joined us today as sort of expert witnesses. Thank you very much. We move now to our final resolution submitted by the Standing Committee. In a moment, I will ask the president of the Standing Committee, the Reverend Maria Hecker, who serves as the rector at St. Columba Church in Boothbay Harbor, to present it. First, a word about the language. We use this canonical and legal word called forfeiture of union. It's not the term that we would choose to describe a moment in God's unfolding plan, but since this does have legal effect, we have to use it. We're going to watch a video. I'm mindful of the time. We did, in fact, allow for a contingency today in terms of our schedule, and I think we will need to use that extra time. There is a chance for us to see the video, so please do stay to see it. But I would like now to ask the Reverend Shirley Bowen, who's the Executive Director of Seeds of Hope and was the person who last served as the rector of Christ Church in Biddeford, to say a few words about Christ Church and about Seeds of Hope. Thank you very much, Shirley, for your faithfulness and for giving us a word this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I'd like to begin by thanking Mark Spar and Katie Clark for the time and energy that they brought to putting this video together. They came to Biddeford and met with many people to capture pieces of our history and our current mission. A reality of all that photography, history, and many hours of footage is that sometimes, inevitably, some pieces will end up on the cutting floor. And otherwise, the video could have been about 3 times longer. As is the case with many small nonprofits, the executive director tends to be the face of the organization. However, there are many faces and groups that require mention. Christ Church had a very long history of dedicated, compassionate clergy, one of whom is still in the diocese, the Reverend Suzanne Colburn. But only a few were able to be seen in the pictures you'll see in the video. I want to call all of these faithful servants to our minds, for they extended great care to the parishioners and to the community. Seeds of Hope would have never gained traction or succeeded without the early support of the diocese and St. David's in Kennebunk, and then the following years adding our other York County parishes and summer chapels as partners. They have all been incredibly generous and supportive. And finally, Seeds of Hope could not offer the wide range of services and compassionate care for our neighbors without the heart of the organization, the hundreds of volunteers and board members. They make Seeds of Hope work. So while watching the video, I'd like you to hold on to that thought of the many angels who have made this all possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call upon Katie. There we go.
It all begins with a meal. When we started back in 2008, we served peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and coffee a couple of afternoons a week, and then we have grown. So folks come in for a variety of reasons. They come in because they're hungry. They come in because they're isolated. They need a place where they're not going to be judged. And they come because some can't make ends meet. They are on fixed incomes. So we try to help relieve that by saying, for clothing and for food, come here and get what you need, to just try to take the pressure off of them a little. I'm the Reverend Shirley Bowen. I'm the Executive Director of the Seeds of Hope Neighborhood Center.
The history of Christ Church in Biddeford, Maine is the story of how this church, organized in 1869 to meet the spiritual needs of mill workers from England, developed into a working-class parish who dedicated themselves to nourishing their congregation and, through outreach, their neighborhood and all of Biddeford. Throughout their history, the church was committed to the community, and the choices they made, through periods of growth and decline and frequent financial struggle, reflect that. In 2008, the Congregation of Christ Church in Biddeford decided to let go. And in doing so, they intentionally transformed from a house of worship to a Jubilee Center, now sharing God's presence and abiding love with so many more people than they ever would have as Christ Church.
We had a small endowment. They could have elected to drop me down to quarter time, and they could have limped along for another few years. And they said to each other, that is not what we think is a faithful call that God wants us to do in this community, because we've started taking care of people who are really desperate and need help, and that's what we should be doing. We became a Jubilee Center in 2008, but we got permission from the Diocese for Christ Church to become a non-worshiping congregation and for the resources to be dedicated to the work of Seeds of Hope. We decided to explore becoming a Jubilee Center. And initially we hadn't considered it because we didn't see ourselves like the one in Lewiston. But then we realized that we could form our own vision of a Jubilee Center, which is what we did. We talked with our partners and talked with people in the community and said, well, this is what we can offer. We can do this, which was initially peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and coffee. And then gradually we added a little bit more food and another day of the week. And when the Career Center closed in Saco in 2008, when the crash hit, and people were losing jobs and they were closing the Career Center. So we said we have to do something about that. So I created a Career Center to help people who needed to get back in the saddle once the jobs came back again. So we have just historically listened to the community. If the need's not being met, then we ask ourselves, is it consistent with our mission and can we do it? And then if so, we figure out how to get it done.
My name's Pamela Balducci, and I've lived here in Maine going on 3 years.
My name is Aaron Doucette, and I've been homeless in Biddeford for about 2 years now.
My name is Richard Brochu. I grew up here in Biddeford. I've been here for 28 years.
I heard of Seeds of Hope just from all the neighborhood kids. A lot of the young people in the area, they all seem to want to come here. I think there's other places for them to go, but they prefer to come here.
Warm food, a place to go and socialize with friends with no worries, and enjoy a cup of coffee, or coming out of the woods in a cold winter morning, like you need a little pick-me-up, and to have a good place to do so, a safe place and wonderful people. It's definitely helpful. Start your morning in a good mood.
Seeds of Hope. It's a place where you can go and you're not shunned away. It's a place where you can go and get food if you need it. It's a place where you can go to get counseling. Anything.
Well, they provide lunches and stuff, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be eating good every day. You don't realize how hard things are until you get out there and have to start paying your rent and all your other expenses that add up.
Describe Seeds of Hope to someone who had never heard of it before.
A great place to try to start over and pick up, you know. It's just like if you don't know what to do or where to go, there's people here to help you, or at least point you in the right direction. Get you off your feet, get you at least feeling better about life.
My whole life, like, experience has been here. At Seeds of Hope, at In a Pinch, at Go Green. I went to high school here. I met a lot of my great friends from here. A lot of great people that have like guided me on my journey of path.
Me, I'm trying to go back to work after 18 years, and so they helped me update my resume. I'm on to a good start.
Reverend has helped me through a lot of #deep times where I felt like I needed someone to pray for me. It was the kindness and kind of like, you know, a second mother, you know, and to get somebody who doesn't know me and only knows what I'm saying and like sees me crying in front of them. It's amazing. I don't know how they are able to shut their own personal stuff off to come here and help us with our issues.
What would you say about Reverend Shirley over here?
I will say she doesn't judge. She's not a judgmental person, and when she didn't really know any of us, and she let us come in here, have our Go Green meetings when we were all just a bunch of punk kids.
Tell us more, what is Go Green?
Go Green is, it's a group that got together when my two friends got shot on South Street.
The two brothers who were murdered, their last name was Green. The night after the murder, a vigil was held just down the street, and I went because I felt I needed to be there, and immediately one of the young people came up and grabbed me. She saw my collar, and she came up and grabbed me and said, "We need a prayer." I said, "Okay." She got everyone's attention. I did a prayer. You know, people spoke, and we had just started having neighborhood meetings, and we were having them here. Because people were concerned about some of the crime in the area. It was really clear that after that we needed to have a meeting right away, because there were just feelings all over the place, as you can imagine, at the vigil. So we let everyone know about the next meeting, and we had a huge turnout. And one of the things that came out of that meeting was there were some adults who were supporting the young people who were the friends, but from their perspective, nobody would help them. And they didn't know what to do, and they were literally meeting in a condemned building. And I said, that's got to stop. This will be your home. I will support you any way we can. And there was a group, mostly family members of the two boys who were murdered, and then their group of friends that we just started meeting regularly. And it was an extraordinary experience of trying to support them through this real anguish.
We banded together to stop bullying, stop all the gangs, like the gangs that were around here, just to stop everything. And it was a sad moment, but a happy moment at the same time. I can't really explain like how it felt, because it all happened so fast. I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel when I was 15. Yeah. I was going down a dark road, and if it wasn't for Seeds of Hope, if it wasn't for In a Pinch, there's a lot of ladies that I owe a big thanks to, and a lot of gentlemen that I owe a big thanks to.
Yeah.
You know, we always said the ministry didn't end, it just transformed. There were times when this was a very vibrant parish, and even as the membership was declining, they had so much faith. They were deeply faithful. both to God and to each other. Our final service here was Christmas Eve in 2012. And, people said, oh, you must be, so upset. And it's hard to close a parish. But I was also so excited about what was happening and that it was birthed by these people of Christ Church. And they were faithful in being servants to God's children. Short-term legacy is that people know that they can come here and be loved and not judged. And that's what I say to my volunteers. If you can't do anything else, just love them, and all the rest is gravy. Longer-term legacy, and it feels a near impossibility, but I'm not going to stop. And that is that everybody who lives outside has a roof over their head. That's what I would like our longest-term legacy to be.
The Spirit of Christ is alive at the Seeds of Hope Neighborhood Center. The holy conversations within its walls have given more visibility to God's presence and love as manifested in the work of Seeds of Hope than the small parish of Christ Church could have done on its own. The building of Christ Church, now Seeds of Hope, is fostering worship, although in a different way. When caring for God's people is the foundation of the conversation in our communities, truly, the listening and sharing are holy.
If we were together in person, many of us who are able would stand and we would clap. And if you are able to do that, please stand where you are. And if you are not, please do whatever else you can to give an ovation to this fantastic church and place. Shirley, we are so grateful to you for the people who continue at Seeds of Hope. And there's been some questions in the chat about Seeds of Hope. Is it a Jubilee Center? Is it part of the Diocese of Maine? The answer is yes, and yes, and yes. And on behalf of an entire church, not just in Maine, but a church throughout the country, we say to you, thank you. Well done, good and faithful servant.
Amen.
I call upon now the president of the standing committee to put before us the formal resolution.
Thank you, Bishop. This is Resolution 9, Forfeiture of Union in regard to closure of Christ Episcopal Church in Biddeford, Maine. Resolved in accordance with Article 7, Section 2 of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine Constitution, Bishop Thomas J. Brown and the Standing Committee of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine recommend to the 201st Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine that the Union of Christ Episcopal Church in Biddeford, Maine, and its right representation at convention be forfeited by vote of the convention.
Life has changed, not ended. This is a solemn moment, and we give thanks for the lives and people of many faithful over many generations. We remember what they have given to this community and to this church, and what they continue to give in their ongoing presence as Seeds of Hope Jubilee Center. Let's just take a few moments of silence, and then the poll will be in front of us. The polls are open.
Thank you, Bishop.
Polls are closing. polls are closed.
Bishop Convention has accepted the forfeiture of union with Christ Church Biddeford, 225 in favor, 2 opposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Friends, it's 12:30 and we are going to use our contingency time plus. We are nearing the end of our time. I'm so grateful for your patience, for your engagement, for your shifting and doing a whole thing new. We have just a few matters left, but they're really important. So I wonder, I'm just checking in with you. I wonder if you are good to proceed. We probably have about 10 minutes left. Would it be okay for us to keep working? Or do you need a break? I'm seeing many hands say we can proceed.
For it.
If you need a break, please take one and come back to us quickly. We move now to a matter of importance, which has to do with our general church. Remember that we don't say national church, we talk about the general church because we are in many countries. And I would like to say a word about General Convention and remind us that we elected deputies last year, including the Reverend Maria Hecker, Reverend Claudia Smith, the Very Reverend Benjamin Shambo, and the Reverend Nina Pooley. And in the lay order, Mr. Mark Spar, Richard Rosine, Susan Mayer, and Sarah Brake. And I'd like to call now on Mark Spar, who is the chair of our deputation, to give us a word about what occurred in Austin in 2018 and to remind us of some important things that we need to do at this convention related to the 2018 General Convention. Mark?
Thank you, Bishop. At the 179th General Convention held in Austin, Texas in 2018, several changes to the Constitution of the Episcopal Church were passed. As such, each diocese is required to make known such proposed alterations to their respective conventions. Without objection, I move that we dispense with the reading of each of these changes to the Constitution and instead direct the delegates of this 201st Convention to our website, episcopalmaine.org, where links to each document will be available for review.
I call now upon the Secretary of Convention, Lee Spar.
Can I just say how happy I am? I don't have to stand up in front of all of you people and do this. Information about the 202nd Annual Convention will be published on the convention webpage and or subsequent editions of the dialogue and be posted on the social media outlets of the diocese. The complete journal of the 201st Annual Convention will be made available to the diocese, along with the diocesan directory of diocesan officers, committee and commission chairs in each church office.
Thank you very much, Lee. And the days are surely coming when you will in fact have to stand in front of us, but we're very glad that you're here today. Earlier today, when you approved the consent calendar, you also approved my nomination of the Reverend Robert Landry, who serves as the rector of St. Andrew Church in Millinocket for a 3-year term as canon sacrist of the Cathedral Church of St. Luke. Bob succeeds the Reverend John Balicki, and we give thanks for both of these persons for serving in this way. On the screen in just a moment, you'll see several courtesy resolutions, which you also adopted in the consent calendar. Let me just give you a quick rundown of what it is that you are asking us to do after we adjourn this afternoon. First of all, we are going to send greetings to Bishop Knudsen and to her husband, Michael. We're going to send greetings to Bishop Lane and express thanks to him and also continuing care and sympathy in the wake of Gretchen's death. And we are also going to say thanks to several leaders in our midst who are retiring from great leadership posts, especially to Peter Bickford, who's been the chair of our compensation committee, to Doug Mayer, who served time on the standing committee, to Ginny Urbanik, who's been on diocesan council, and also to Kimberly Wallace for the same. We're sending appreciation and thanksgiving to our governor and to Dr. Nirav Shah for their incredible work in this unprecedented time. And so that is what we are proposing that we do after this. And there's one other matter coming before us before we do the necrology. And I'd like now to ask that the slide be put up. In the last week or so, several of your leaders have worked hard to put in front of us a particular courtesy resolution that the chair of the resolutions committee recommended that we read it. We normally don't read them all, but in this particular case, we believe it's important for us to read it for you. And so on behalf of the standing committee, the diocesan council, and the trustees of diocesan funds, the three governing bodies who oversee our life, this resolution is before us, and I call on the speakers to proceed.
Resolved that in recognition of the extraordinary times through which we are now living, the people of the Diocese of Maine, in concert with the governing bodies of the diocese, do give heartfelt thanks for the courageous work of our priests, deacons, diocesan staff, lay leaders, and bishop.
Resolved that when we ourselves are feeling the strain of uncertain times, fear of disease, economic hardship, and social isolation, we pause to bless and pray especially for our clergy who seek to pastor us through the storm, even when they themselves may too be struggling.
Resolved that as members of the body of Christ, each with our own vocation and gifts, we will continue to seek out ways to fulfill our baptismal covenant in support of our clergy, congregations, and ministries in creative new ways, even as we treasure the heritage and wisdom of our past, trusting in God's love for the church and that God is always leading us into new lands of promise and abundance.
Resolved that in seeking to fulfill our mission to spread the gospel, worship the God of holiness, soothe the suffering, and minister to the afflicted, we commit ourselves to living out the fruits of the Spirit, namely peace, patience, and kindness in dealing with unprecedented challenges.
And all God's people said,
Amen.
Amen.
I'd like to call upon the delegate from St. Matthew's in Lisbon Falls. Marilyn, do you have a point of personal privilege? If not.
Sorry, I had trouble unmuting myself. No, I really don't. I was responding to something else we did earlier. So let's move on.
Thank you very much. Just a word again of great thanks for your flexibility, for your fortitude, grace and goodwill. There are so many people to thank, and you know who they are. I want to say thanks to the convention planning team, incredible worship that is in front of us today, that will be in front of you on the morrow. And I look forward to being with you in that way tomorrow on the screen. And also just a word of thanks, particularly to particular members of the diocesan staff. Barbara Martin has been the kind of leader of this effort to get convention in a whole new way. And she has been ably served together as a team with Teresa Pinney and with Katie Clark and with John Hennessy. Others of us have been very much on the sidelines, but the convention planning team has really done the work along with these particular staff people. So again, please join me in saying thank you to all of them. Incredible, incredible faithfulness. A shout out to St. Luke Church in Wilton and to the Cathedral Church of St. Luke as you celebrate your patronal feast tomorrow. And a reminder that this coming Tuesday is a town hall in which we will do some work of evaluating what this day has been like to get your feedback. We're not going to send you a survey. We want to hear whatever you have to say for us as we plan future times that might be in Zoom and might be in person. And there will be announcements made there too. So with prayer and song and without objection, the 201st Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Maine will adjourn after we worship and after we read the necrology. All in favor of proceeding in this way, please do so by waving your hands or clicking on your Zoom hand. The musical work will proceed, and then the necrology will be read by the Reverend John Balicki, Reverend Mary Bork, Reverend Ginny Urbanik, Ms. Kimberly Wallace, and Mr. Peter Bickford, with thanks for their leadership.
Loving God, we commend to your mercy all who have died in 2020, whether from the COVID-19 pandemic, acts of violence, loss of life in wildfires or hurricanes, or other illnesses and diseases. Mrs. Nancy Taxon, Mrs. Eve Barrett, Mr. Gene Higgins, Mrs. Jean Wilkinson, Mrs. Dorothy Glendenning, Ms. Gretchen Jane Lane,
Ms. Marjorie Thomas Clark, Mr. Cameron Smith, Mrs. Suzanne Fudge, the Reverend Richard Dick Rasner, Mr. Richard Dick Clinton,
Mrs. Margaret Bevan, Ms. Catherine Adams, Mr. Richard Hamilton, the Right Reverend Barbara C. Harris, the Reverend Stephen V. Smith,
Mr. William Petty, the Reverend Deacon Elizabeth Lanny Wenthy, Mr. George Larry Moore, the Reverend James Bocchino, Mrs. Martha Sumner Rhodes, the Reverend Robert M. Raymond,
Mr. Richard Henninger, Mrs. Virginia Marie Grondin, the Reverend Canon Donald Nickerson, the Reverend George Swanson, the Reverend Linda Turman Moore. We pray for the dead and all those who have died, O Lord, those who kept vigil and those who keep vigil, and those who now carry on alone. Lift them to your heart and hold them for eternity. O God, you are among us, make us new. O God, you are the Alpha and the Omega, our beginning and our end. Dwell among us and make us new. Amen.
Amen.
Friends in Christ, our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Blessed be the name of the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. And the blessing, mercy, and grace of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit, be upon you and remain with you this day and forevermore. Amen.
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 We are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. We are marching marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, marching, we are marching, marching, we are marching in the light of God.
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Be to God.
Thanks and goodbye from Brunswick.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks
Goodbye
be to God.
Thanks and
goodbye
from
Kennebunk.
Bye
from
Ellsworth.
And goodbye from Rangeley.
Be to God.
From Newcastle.
Goodbye from
Wait to the next step.
Thanks and goodbye from Bangor.
Bye from Old Town.
Bay Harbor.
Thanks
be God to God. St.
Bye
Patrick's.
from Portland.
Bye from
Bye from Bath.
Bye from Sanford.
Bye from
Bye from York Harbor.
Bye from
Bangor. From Atchison.
Yes.
Bye from Thomaston.
From Kennebunk.
Bye from Yarmouth.
Bye from Castine.
Bye-bye.
Bye from Norway. Goodbye
Thanks
from
be to
Baileyville.
God, and goodbye from Orland.
Bye from Calais.
Bye from Lisbon.
Bye from Ellsworth.
Bye from Thomaston.
Goodbye from Holton.